I discovered a lot of new media this year. Books, films, music, all sorts of art forms and information have entered into my noggin over these past 12 months or so. And, as humans tend to, I feel the want to categorize and share some of the stuff I found or was introduced to this year with other people. So here, today, I'm going to be going over my top 13 favorite pieces of media that I found this year. Pluto is an anime that recently came to Netflix after 10 plus years of the director trying to adapt it from a manga, which in turn was a dark, gritty retelling of the Astro Boy arc, the greatest robot on Earth. It was one of the most engaging shows I've seen in a long time. That might be due to the length of the episodes, each being about an hour long. I can't think of very many animated series that get such long episodes in runtime. I really liked how the mystery unfolded. It was genuinely well told, and when revelations would occur, they would feel gratifying, because the viewer would have been given enough information beforehand to make sense of them. The overlapping allegories are also really fascinating. Robots are often a good conduit for the questions and narrative discussions the series addresses. Also, in my humble opinion, the redesigns of the characters from the classic Astro Boy are very well done. I really liked Tenma and Gesicht specifically. One of my favorite things was done with them, which is having them look relatively quote-unquote normal and everyday while still having distinct characteristics. After watching the show, I also discovered a sort of interview with Naoki Urasawa and Mai Oneyama, and because I am a nerd, I enjoyed it more than the show itself. The way they discuss their inspirations and how their conversation flows organically due to both of their familiarity with the mediums they're discussing is so amazing to watch. And yes, maybe I am jealous because I want to talk about art with other people like that, but this is my way of doing that. Even if you don't watch Pluto, the joy of drawing itself is really nice. Le sommet des dieux, or The Summit of the Gods in English, is a film adaptation of the manga by the same name. It's about a photographer searching for George Mallory's missing camera in order to find out if he was the first to climb Mount Everest. This film is incredibly well paced. There is not a moment of this movie I was not engaged, and not just in terms of visuals. It's gripping and really invests you into the plot as the stakes get higher and higher. But the visuals are absolutely stunning too, opting for a much more realistic style than animation generally uses. The backgrounds especially could be mistaken for photographs at points. I've never been a huge creepypasta guy myself, although one of my best friends is, so at first I thought Hazel and May's A Normal Creepypasta Retrospective was just a wonderfully, thoroughly researched love letter to an often under-respected medium of storytelling. But as the video goes on, the viewer, in this case me, may begin to notice strange threads connecting the narrators to their subjects. I won't give anything away, as the delight of the video is slowly figuring out the bigger picture yourself, but suffice to say I was equal parts blown away and also incredibly pissed someone beat me to making such a clever project. Hazel and May, if there's any chance you're watching this, please let me work with you. There's also a companion video explaining the process behind the retrospective itself, the research and community collaboration that went into its creation. And again, as a weird piece of media production nerd, I found myself liking this video just as much as the actual piece it was breaking down. I'd really strongly recommend not watching this explanation until after you've watched the actual video, obviously, as it gives away everything that builds up tension while watching the retrospective itself. But it's a fascinating and passionate process, and it's so clear this is a topic both creators have an immense amount of love for. If you haven't heard of it before, Petscop is a series? Wikipedia calls it a YouTube horror web series, but I feel like that doesn't accurately convey its bizarre structure and ambiguous web of mysteries properly. In short, Petscop is the story of Paul, a young man who finds a PlayStation game called Petscop in his home. Paul starts to record Let's Play videos exploring the game, slowly uncovering stranger and stranger things about it that start to feel familiar to him. That's really all I'll say in terms of plot. Where Petscop really shines to me is through Paul himself. People tend to disagree when I say this, but I absolutely love boring and naturalistic dialogue, and Paul's voice actor knocks it out of the park, to the point where I'm pretty sure some folks first discovering the Petscop Let's Plays thought that they were legitimately real.
Sorry for not talking very much. I'm a little bewildered, if you want to know the truth. This is a little more than I was expecting to see.
Paul's relationship to the events of the Petscop game, and the disjointed way that they are presented to the viewer, makes Petscop just as good, if not better, a mystery than something like Pluto. Things are left a bit murky, with the creator stating himself he doesn't have real reasons for doing or including certain things. But it gives Petscop the aura that, yeah, you never could understand. The only one who could truly understand is Paul himself. It also plays into a similar type of fear to something like Skinamarink, the helplessness and fogginess of childhood memory. Tobias Rud's The Tobos, created through the Open Workshop Artist Residency in Denmark, is the most gut-wrenchingly accurate representation of an inability to find connection that I've seen. It reminds me a wee bit of the Scrumbo section of Goodbye Forever Party, except instead of being through the lens of a character playing a role, the character is the role, and their inability to play the only role they know themselves to be is what contributes to their desperate attempts to claw against their own anhedonia. It distills isolation, feeling sort of empty around even those you love, and finding yourself having hurt them because of that emptiness, knowing there's something wrong and not knowing the right way to fix it. The animation uses its effects beautifully, both visually and thematically. The nostalgic distortion's a representation of the protagonist's outlook. The sound is also really well designed, and I love how the tobos don't speak, but still have such emotive voices. It's very heartfelt and honest, just not very conventional in the way it goes about saying what it means. Archivist Bot is a blog run by Tumblr user Pajamak, on which people can submit questions to be answered by a bot mimicking the style of the podcast The Magnus Archives. These questions generally receive silly and nonsensical answers. On November 16th, 2020, a phrase was submitted. He was undeserved and knew it too well. What followed was a response that included none of the Magnus Archives characters, settings, or familiar aspects. A short story with understandably ambiguous writing, The Man Without a Dog, Catalogue d'Agenot, focuses on the titular man without a dog and his neighbor referred to only as the painter. Through a series of subsequent asks, a dreary and listless world in which it always rains and the two men can never find what they're looking for, if they're looking for anything at all, unfolds. The Man Without a Dog is incredibly interesting, in large part due to its status as bot-written. I'm not a fan of machine learning quote-unquote creativity, but what I think sets The Man Without a Dog apart from something like ChatGPT scripts is, first and foremost, it's not trying to replace anyone. It's not created for profit or out of laziness. The Man Without a Dog explores this really interesting path in which the bot is allowed to stray from its initial reason of conception, which feels almost metaphorical, as bots themselves are typically created for one function. The jumbled, ambiguous wording forces the reader to think about the text more, making the story almost personalized, the reader filling in the gaps with their own context and interpretation. Even if you don't agree, the collaboration between anonymous question asker and machine collaged response is an unusual medium that is fascinating to ponder the implications of. I'd love to do a reading of the entire tag one day, but for now, I'll leave you with a section I like a lot. Are the painter and the man without a dog called anything else? Names are a very serious matter. They can be traps. They can fix you in your place, stick to your bones, hold fast your feet as you walk. It is best that you don't know their names, or else you will never leave them. Bodies of Water is so rich in metaphor that it loops back around to being almost entirely literal. It follows Lake, a trans man whose friend Mac takes him swimming for the first time in years at a local pond. The film's core lies in Lake and Mac's repertoire. Their natural and charming banter gives the feeling they're not only fleshed-out people, but real friends with a real understanding of each other. Their personalities show evidently through both the words they say and the actions they take, all of it animated and voiced stylishly and engrossingly. The film takes advantage of the fact that it's a film, playing its visuals and sound in contrast to one another, leading to the same kind of dissonance in the viewing experience as Lake feels floating through his objective, day-to-day horror of body dysphoria. It's legitimately one of the most visually appealing shorts I've ever seen, but that probably just reflects my specific tastes. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was not really my thing. I'm not the biggest fan of spin-offs and remakes in general, and the tongue-in-cheek attitude of the series felt a little bit patronizing. However, I fucking love the fight between Roxy and Ramona, as is evident from its place on this list. The fight really takes advantage of the fantastical aspects of the universe it's in. Roxy and Ramona flying through DVD and VCR worlds, smashing up a rental store as a conduit for their unresolved feelings. Feelings that are potent, the personal and tangible stakes, as well as the fantastically raw voice acting and animation, I think make it the most emotionally strong fight of the series. You rarely get to see fight scenes, if scenes at all, in anime, where women aren't presented voyeuristically. But here, Roxy and Ramona are just two women beating the absolute shit of each other, treated with the same level of respect as something like Matthew and Gideon. It's my favorite fight scene of the entire year, and honestly is shot up to be one of my favorite fight scenes ever. I literally think about this shot every day. The way Roxy rolls around in frustration before desperately scrambling back up to lunge at Ramona literally lives in my head, rent-free, as the kids say. Sculptor's Daughter is a collection of short stories by Tove Jansson, who you might know as the creator of The Moomins, recounting events from her childhood. However, unlike most memoirs I've read, Sculptor's Daughter focuses much more on smaller, more intimate and passing experiences. The sorts of things that often tend to be forgotten as one gets older. Rolling a large rock across the street, a big storm, seeing an iceberg. But she always recounts them with such a feeling of wonder and gravity that you, too, feel the importance of these events to her life. How when you're young, every experience is a new experience, and thusly, every experience carries equal weight in shaping someone. I really love to read other people's memoirs, journals, and recounts of their personal experiences, as a human being, there's only so much you can experience in one lifetime, a lifetime constrained by the time and place and circumstance of your birth. But memoirs allow you to dip temporarily into the lives of others, almost adding the imagined version of their lives to your mental library of memories and experiences. And the language used in Sculptor's Daughter is so tactile, so evocative, that it puts you much more into the state of being at that time, rather than just Johnson looking back detachedly but fondly on something that happened a long time ago. Princess Arete opens with her wonder that humans can make things with their hands. Could she, too? Arete is trapped up in her tower, sneaking out every day to experience the human wonders of the town below, then scurrying back up before anyone can notice she's gone. Arete is dissatisfied with the life she lives, despite the apparent privilege of being royalty. She wants to be allowed to live a life of her own, not of suitors killing in her name, not of villages pillaged for the idea of her. She's been made to think she's capable of nothing, existing for others, despite her actions clearly showing otherwise. Princess Arete is very slow, and I'm sure most people would find it boring, especially compared to the fun book it's somewhat based on. But what I can say for sure is that it's about Arete's choices and lack thereof. It's about her love for the world, humanity, and her recognition of her own worth and right to be fulfilled. It's about how people get knocked around by the world and how they choose to respond to their circumstance, what they choose to make of what's decreed of them. Princess Arete is a hard film to describe. I could never do it proper justice, especially in what it means to me. The world is a big and scary place, with many things out of one's control. You're born into a world you didn't have a say in creating. So what will you make of it? Before we hit top 3, I'd just like to rapid fire spit out some other media I like this year, but that I don't feel compelled to discuss at length. These include Scrapper, directed by Charlotte Regan, Parfois les lacs brûlent by Geneviève Biguet, The Kennedy Assassination, Inside the Book Depository by Lemino, The Clue of the Screeching Owl by James Buechler, Les Cahiers d'Esther by Riyad Satouf, The Third Person by Emma Grove, Children of the Sea by Daisuke Igarashi, The Evil Eye Thanatology by Roswell Park, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish from DreamWorks. Also, Délicatesse by Val Wise, but I read this on December 31st, so... This is the only release this year I was actually waiting for with bated breath. It's not a one-to-one adaptation of the comics. It condenses things, takes things out, adds things. But the biggest change is in the overarching plot. While the comics brush over the disappearance of the character's friend Jonas, that is the central focus of the show. The search for where he went, the mystery of what happened to him, drive this first season with a very strong engine. Literally the only criticism I had of the whole season was that Krum's voice can be kind of grating, making it hard to suspend disbelief that he's a tween. But that's the sort of personal opinion that is easily waved off when weighted beside all the positives the series has to offer. I'm going to try to keep this as brief and as spoiler-free as I can, because I really want folks to watch this with an open mind of their own. The first thing I absolutely love is what was done with Steppe and Ulysse as characters. Both of them feel like the most fleshed out, Ulysse especially, and especially in comparison to how she was portrayed in the books. Her nigh excitement at being cursed, as if the stories she writes are coming to life around her, her escapist nature, her ability to make mistakes and have to face the consequences of her actions, are all things I criticize the books for lacking, but are integral to her character in the show. Steppe, similarly, is an expanded upon version of her comic counterpart. She's a smartass, but alongside actually being smart. She's not a snitch and knows when to stand up for herself. But the inklings that maybe she can't always fix the things she wants to set her up incredibly compellingly for the second season of the show. Puss is also really interestingly set up. His transition moving between Paris and Cantal, city and country, his slow acclimation and growing connection to the other kids around him. Although it feels the relatively short run of the season didn't lend him enough time to be delved into very deeply, and may have been a tad rushed as a result. There isn't as much to say yet about Creepypasta, May, and Lina. All three at this point feel pretty archetypal still, with hints of deeper characterization here and there. The monsters are pretty similar to the comics with the exception of one, although many are cut out for time's sake. The Cantalian folklore also appears to be expanded upon, with things like the Croix de Peur, dances of spirits, and the witch hunting past of Château de Bransac. The music of the show is also pretty good. The use of the full version of the theme song, Vois mon enfant, in the final episode did make me cry. There are themes and motifs that occur over the 6 episodes. Take this one that I've dubbed a sort of wonder motif.
La forteresse des anciens.
I also love the way the hurdy-gurdy becomes used as a sonic indicator for danger, taking advantage of its droning, buzzing quality in a way I've never heard any media do before. Le Collège Noir, Complainte d'Auvergne already apparently has a 2nd season in production. I really hope the series gets an English release, as I think it could find a very welcoming audience with the sorts of folks hungry for darker/teen-oriented animation. Fox Academy is my favorite band, and so I think it's only expected that their most recent album, Joseph's Deli and Lottery, would make it so high on this list. The album continues some hallmarks of Fox Academy's style, their anecdotal lyrics, their washed-out soundscape mixing, their lovesick, comforting singing. Joseph's Deli and Lottery also released at a very specific time this year, a time I was very sure I had just made a fool of myself in front of some pretty important people, and possibly ruined everything forever. Might be parasocial as fuck, I mean, at least I acknowledge it, right? But the release of the album felt like having some old friends around to help me out. But isn't that what a good piece of music does? Of media? Isn't that the essence of all human connection? Nobody wants to feel lonely, and music allows us to dip into ourselves like a well, whether we're the maker or the listener, and lose ourselves in sounds that tether us to other human beings on the planet. I must restate how Fox Academy is my favorite band. I love everything Novelli and Brûlent make, and Joseph's Deli and Lottery is another absolute smash hit for them in my books. Although it's more like gentle snowflake landing on a windshield than actual smashing and hitting. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think there's much I can do to argue that Pépé le Morse, its English title Grandpa Walrus, is necessarily better than anything else on this list. However, for me specifically, it's everything I love about stories wrapped up in one. The short follows a family who have ventured to the beach after the grandfather's funeral, and from the opening, the dialogue inspired by real conversations, the muted, mottled palette, this short sunk a fishing hook into my chest that has not come out since. I honestly don't even know where to begin. Pépé le Morse seems to be the first film of director Lucrèce Andrés to be made outside of school. It went on to win and be nominated for a lot of awards and play at a lot of festivals, which I think is completely deserved, but not the focus of my appreciation for it. Andrea talks about her own family being inspirations for the designs of the characters, and her childhood memories being inspiration for the decor. Her approach to the character design is, as she put it, looking for specificity rather than using formulaic design conventions. It's a skill I hope to get better at myself, a kind of caricature that doesn't fall back on cliché, that just from looking conveys how a person is the combination of the inside and outside of themselves. Does anybody else ever get the feeling that all the imperfections and distinctions, characteristics labeled ugly, and the people around them are the most wonderful thing? The character designs in Pépé le Morse feel like that sentiment caught and pressed between hands. The backgrounds are gorgeous, continuing the feeling of gray, dreary, Shoji Ueda-inspired isolation. They were apparently watercolor, and the process to get the clouds to look great was so specific that many attempts had to be thrown out. Pépé le Morse has an almost documentary-like quality about it. We get a snapshot into these people's lives, and that's all we need. No gratuitous backstories, no world-ending stakes, no grand spectacle. We meet this family, and then we part ways, like hearing a snippet of a stranger's conversation on the street. Even the brief English description is pretty much perfect to me. On the windy and cloudy beach, Granny is praying, Mom is shouting, the sisters don't care, Lucas is alone. Grandpa was a weird guy, now he's dead. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you can find enjoyment or wonder at least one of the things I've covered today. Please feel welcome to tell me about your favorite media of the past year, or to recommend me something in return. I really love to discover new things, and who knows, if you don't tell me about something, I might never hear about it. That's why I made this video. These are all things I thoroughly loved this year, and the idea that if I were not to discuss them, some people may never hear of them drove me to action. 2023 was a wild year for me, and I'd just like to thank everyone I met and talked to. Your interactions and words stay with me, no matter how small the encounter. I love all your quirks, the stories you tell me from your lives, the passion when you discuss something you love with me, the happiness I feel when you allow me to discuss what I love in return. I hope to pay that same kind of passion forward, and I'm very excited for the new things next year might introduce me to.